Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to be changing a carburetor on a Cadet LTX1045, equipped with a Kohler Courage 20 horse, model number SV601. Let's get to it. Today you're going to need a 3/8 inch ratchet, a 8mm socket, a 10mm socket, a pair of pliers, and a pair of hose line clamps. Also handy is some rags and carb cleaner. Kohler Courage 20 horse. The actual model number is an SV601. Customer complained that the engine would not stay running. We got it to run on choke, but it won't run off choke. We're going to take this hood off and see what we've got going on here. Take the hood off, and disconnect the headlights, which we've already done. Okay, this engine would start and run on choke. When you turn the choke off, it would immediately die. So we're going to take this air filter cover off. We'll try to start the engine now. It's been a couple days since I've tried to start it while we were waiting on parts, so it may not start. Okay, since this engine won't start, I'll just kind of describe to you what it was doing. It would start, it would run on choke. As soon as you turn the choke off, it would die. You could spray some carb cleaner on top of the carburetor, and it would, the RPMs of the engine would go up. It was only right on top of the throttle shaft. Kohler no longer makes a throttle shaft repair kit. Matter of fact, they no longer make this carburetor. That's what we're going to have to do, is replace the carburetor. We had to go with an aftermarket carburetor, per Kohler's suggestion. However, we will still be using Kohler gaskets, and I'll put that gasket kit number in the description. The aftermarket carburetor comes with gaskets, but they're very, very thin. I'm not sure you can tell much difference in these on the camera there. This is the Kohler. This is the aftermarket that came with the carburetor. They're about the same size. The difference is the thickness. I don't know if you can tell much there. So we're going to go with the Kohler gaskets. We got two 10mm bolts and an 8mm bolt up here. This one is already equipped with a fuel shutoff valve, so we won't be needing the hose clamps. one 8mm bolt right here on top. Disconnect the two lines going to the breather cover. Inspect the breather cover for damage. I'm going to go ahead and clamp this line off. Clamp it right in front of the filter. Take your pliers. Unplug your fuel solenoid. There's a spring connected to the throttle shaft. Be careful not to bend that spring because the engine will not run correctly without it. Sometimes it is easier to take the rod out first. Now this carburetor, as I said, it was leaking right around this shaft. You could spray some carb cleaner in there, you could hear a difference in the tone of the engine. We've actually already replaced the plastic spacer behind the carburetor because we initially thought that was the problem, and that changed nothing. So we went back over it, and right on top of this shaft, if you spray, that's where it's leaking air at. So, and that carburetor number, I believe, was 2085395. And as I said, they no longer make that carburetor. So these gaskets on this spacer, sometimes they use an adhesive on it. So it's a little bit of a booger to get the old gasket off, but I would suggest changing it. There's one 8mm bolt that grounds out the fuel solenoid. and also holds this plastic spacer in place. Some of this model engine also, instead of a spacer behind the carburetor, they have a heat shield. I'll also put the part number for that in the description and at the end of the video. Take it off. It may be easier to get that adhesive off. In fact, the gasket behind needs to be replaced as well. Okay, we got most of it off there. That adhesive is never going to come off unless you just get lucky. We'll put the stud back in the spacer. It should sit right down in there. This gasket actually has the adhesive. Make sure your bolt holes are lined up. This gasket also has the adhesive on it. And I always, one side of this gasket is slotted, the other side has a round hole. I always put the slotted side on the stud that's on the spacer. Now we will inspect the carburetor, make sure that it's as close as possible to what we took off. Of course, being a jet or a Chinese carburetor, it's not going to be exact. One other thing, there's a plastic bushing on the top of this carburetor on the throttle shaft. We'll remove that, use it in the new carburetor. That's pretty small, I don't know if you can see it. Also, it has two grooves. It has a long groove and a small groove. You need to put it in so that when your Z-hook on your throttle rod goes in, it comes out the long slot. That will just snap into place. rods back up. Hook your fuel solenoid back up. Put this gasket back on. Again, it's got one slotted side. Hook your fuel line back up. Take your fuel line off, and if you have a shut off valve, turn it on. See if you're leaking any fuel or not. Heard that.
Walked around the corner and he's just sitting in his chair.
You may have heard that little squeak at the end. I'm thinking I may need to adjust the valves on this one too before we send it home. So we may make another video on that. Okay, we've got a new air filter that we're going to put on. As always, make sure your shop is ventilated if you're working inside. It runs. Doesn't run great, but it runs better than it did. there you have it. That job took us 45 minutes. The carburetor was about $30 on Amazon. The gasket kit with the spacer included is about $13. You can get that from us or your local small engine shop. We do have a website in the works. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please like this video and subscribe to our page.